Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and felt his boots sink into the red dust of Kepler 442b. The air was thick and warm, and the twin suns cast strange purple shadows across the mining camp that stretched before him. He pulled his duffel bag over his shoulder and looked around at the massive structures that housed the galactic mining operation. Everything looked clean and shiny, like it had been built yesterday. The camp was huge, bigger than any place Jake had ever seen back on Earth. Tall buildings made of some kind of white metal reached toward the sky, and strange machines moved between them without making any sound. Jake had grown up on a farm in Iowa, where the biggest building was the old red barn his grandfather had built 50 years ago. This place made him feel very small. A tall figure approached him from the main building. The creature walked on two legs like a human, but its skin looked like it was made of blue glass, and light seemed to move through it like water. This was a Zephyrian, one of the most important species in the Galactic Federation. Jake had studied about them during his long trip to this planet, but seeing one in person was still amazing. "You must be the human agricultural specialist," Zephyrian said in perfect English, though its voice sounded like wind chimes. "I am Commander Veltar, the leader of this operation. I must say, we were not expecting someone so primitive-looking." Jake tried to smile and held out his hand for a handshake, but the commander stepped back and looked at Jake's hand like it was covered in poison. "Please keep your distance, human. We have strict hygiene protocols in this camp." The commander turned and started walking toward the buildings, and Jake followed behind him. As they walked, Jake saw other aliens working around the camp. Some had 4 arms and moved very fast, carrying complicated tools that Jake did not recognize. Others looked like giant insects but wore clothes and talked to each other in languages that sounded like music. Jake had never imagined so many different kinds of intelligent life could exist in one place. This facility houses 847 beings from 12 different species. Commander Veltar said as they walked, "Each species contributes their natural abilities to our mining operations. The Vortakians handle our technology. With their superior intellect and multiple appendages, the Nexari provide leadership and strategic planning. The humans provide manual labor." Jake felt his face get hot when the commander said that last part, but he kept quiet. He was here to do a job, and arguing with the camp leader on his first day would not help anyone. They stopped in front of a small building at the edge of the camp, far away from all the other structures. The building looked old and worn compared to everything else Jake had seen. "This will be your quarters," the commander said. "You will find everything you need inside. Your work assignment will be provided tomorrow morning." Jake opened the door and looked inside. The room was tiny, with just a bed, a desk, and a small food processor. There was one small window that looked out at the empty desert beyond the camp. He set his duffel bag on the bed and turned back to the commander. "Sir, I brought some soil samples from Earth," Jake said. "I was hoping to set up a small agricultural research area to see if we can grow fresh food here." The report said, "This planet has good mineral content in the soil." Commander Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like breaking glass. "Human, we do not play in dirt here. This is an advanced scientific operation. We have state-of-the-art food synthesis facilities that create perfectly balanced nutrition without any need for your primitive farming methods." "But fresh vegetables could provide better nutrition and variety," Jake said. "And if something happened to the synthetic food systems, having a backup food source could be important." The commander's glass-like skin flickered with angry red light. "Nothing will happen to our systems, human. They are built by the finest minds in the galaxy. Your dirt and seeds are not welcome in this camp. They are unsanitary and beneath our standards. You are here to perform manual labor, not to spread your Earth contamination among civilized beings." Jake wanted to argue more, but he could see that the commander was getting more angry. "Yes, sir, I understand." "Good, report to Supervisor Kexron. In the morning, he will assign you to a work crew." The commander turned and walked away, leaving Jake standing alone in front of his small building. Jake went inside and closed the door. He sat on the bed and opened his duffel bag. Inside, wrapped carefully in plastic containers, were small samples of rich, dark soil from his family's farm in Iowa. There were also several packets of seeds, tomatoes, corn, potatoes, and beans that he had hoped to plant here. His grandfather had told him that good soil was the foundation of all life, and that taking care of the earth was the most important job anyone could have. He looked out his small window at the alien machines moving silently through the camp. The other buildings glowed with soft light, and he could see the shadows of different alien species moving inside them. Everyone seemed to have a purpose and a place in this operation except for him. That night, Jake ate a meal from the food processor. In his room. It tasted like nothing, just a thick paste that filled his stomach but did not satisfy him at all. He missed the fresh vegetables from his garden back home, the taste of a tomato still warm from the sun, the crunch of fresh lettuce, the sweetness of corn picked that same day. Before he went to sleep, Jake took one small container of soil from his bag and hid it under his bed. If the aliens did not want him to farm, he would not ask permission again. But he would not give up on the idea. Completely. His grandfather had always said that sometimes the best things grew in the places where nobody expected them to grow, outside his window. The twin suns set behind the mountains, and the alien camp settled into the quiet rhythm of night. Jake lay in his small bed and planned how he might find a way to prove that Earth's soil and seeds had value, even in this place where everything was made of metal and glass and nobody remembered what it meant to work with their hands in the dirt. 3 months had passed since Jake arrived at the mining camp, and he had settled into a routine that felt like punishment. Every morning he reported to Supervisor Kexron, a 4-armed Vortakian who treated Jake like a broken machine that barely worked. His job was to clean the mining equipment, carry heavy materials between buildings, and perform other tasks that the aliens considered too simple for their advanced minds. During his lunch breaks, Jake would sit alone in his small room and eat the tasteless paste from his food processor. He watched through his window as the other species gathered in groups, sharing meals that looked exactly like his, but somehow seemed more enjoyable when eaten with others. The Zephyrians would sit together, and their glass-like skin would pulse with gentle colors as they talked. The Nexari would arrange themselves in perfect circles and eat in complete silence. The Vortakians would use all 4 arms to eat, while simultaneously working on complicated devices. Jake had tried to join different groups during meal times, but the aliens always found excuses to leave when he approached. Some would say they were discussing technical matters too advanced for human understanding. Others would claim they were having private conversations about their homeworlds. A few would simply ignore him until he walked away. Behind his quarters, in a small patch of ground that nobody else seemed to notice, Jake had been secretly working with his hidden soil samples. He had mixed the earth soil with some of the local dirt and planted a few seeds from his collection. The combination seemed to work better than he had expected. The mineral-rich soil of Kepler 442 be mixed with the living microorganisms from Earth created something special. His tomato plants had grown faster and larger than anything he had ever seen back home. The corn stalks were already taller than Jake himself, and the leaves were a deeper green than he thought possible. The potato plants spread across the ground like thick carpets, and when Jake carefully dug up a few test tubers, they were the size of footballs and felt heavy with moisture and nutrients. Jake kept his garden completely secret. He would tend to it late at night or early in the morning when the camp was quiet and the aliens were busy with their own activities. He used water from his personal supply and was careful not to let anyone see what he was doing. The plants seemed to love the attention and grew stronger every day. One morning, Jake was awakened by loud alarms that echoed throughout the camp. He looked out his window and saw aliens running between the buildings in obvious panic. Red lights flashed from the tops of the main structures, and he could hear voices shouting in languages he did not understand. Jake quickly dressed and ran outside. He found Supervisor Kexron standing near the main food facility, all 4 arms waving as he talked rapidly to a group of other Vortakians. "What is happening?" Jake asked. Kexron looked at Jake with his large black eyes that seemed to hold no emotion. Solar flare has damaged primary food synthesis systems. Quantum processors are offline. This is not your concern, human. Return to your quarters. But Jake could see that this was everyone's concern. More aliens were gathering around the food facility, and their body language showed fear and worry. Zephyrian's skin was flickering with nervous colors, and the normally calm Nexari were talking in loud, urgent voices. Later that day, an announcement was broadcast throughout the camp in the common galactic language that Jake had learned during his journey. Dr. Cathara, the head of nutrition, explained that the solar flare had been much stronger than their shields could handle. The main food synthesis facility was completely destroyed, and the backup systems were running at only 30% capacity. Current food stores will sustain the camp population for approximately 6 weeks, Dr. Cathara announced in a voice that tried to sound calm but clearly was not. The nearest supply vessel will not arrive for 16 weeks. All non-essential personnel will be placed on reduced rations immediately. Jake did not need to guess who would be considered non-essential. That evening, his food processor delivered a portion that was half the normal size, and it tasted even worse than usual. Around the camp, he could see aliens gathering in worried groups, talking in hushed voices about their situation. The next few days were difficult for everyone. The aliens who had always seemed so confident and superior now looked tired and stressed. Their skin colors were duller, their movements slower, and their voices quieter. Jake noticed that the Zephyrians' glass-like skin was losing its bright shine, and the Vortakians were moving their forearms less smoothly than before. Meanwhile, Jake's secret garden continued to thrive. His plants seemed to sense that something was different in the camp, and they grew even faster and stronger. The tomatoes were now the size of melons, bright red and heavy with juice. The corn stalks had grown so tall that Jake had to build supports to keep them from falling over. The potato plants had spread to cover nearly the entire small area behind his quarters. One evening, as Jake was carefully harvesting some vegetables for his own dinner, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around quickly, expecting to see Commander Veltar or another official who would demand to know what he was doing. Instead, he saw a young Zephyrian female whose skin was flickering with colors he had never seen before. "Please do not be alarmed," she said in a soft voice. "I am Zixara, junior scientist in the Biological Research Division. I have been observing your activities from my laboratory window." Jake's heart was beating fast, but he tried to stay calm. "I am not doing anything wrong. This is just a small personal garden." Zixara moved closer and looked at the plants with obvious amazement. "These specimens are remarkable. I have never seen such size and color variation in plant life. The nutritional density readings I have taken from my instruments are far beyond anything our synthesis systems produce." "You have been scanning my plants?" Jake asked. "Yes, and I am not the only one. Several junior staff members have noticed your garden. We are very curious about your methods." Zixara's skin shifted to a gentle blue color that Jake somehow understood meant she was being friendly. "We would like to learn more about your agricultural techniques." Jake looked around to make sure no one else was watching. "If Commander Veltar finds out about this, he will throw me off the planet." "Commander Veltar is not thinking clearly because of the food shortage," Zixara said. "None of the senior officials are. They are too proud to admit that their technology has failed them. But some of us are beginning to think that perhaps there are other solutions they have not considered." That night, Jake lay in his bed thinking about what Zixara had said. For the first time since arriving at the camp, he felt like maybe his knowledge and skills might actually be useful. The aliens were facing a crisis that their advanced technology could not solve, but Jake had something that might help. The question was whether anyone would be willing to listen to a human who worked with dirt and seeds when their survival depended on it. The food crisis was getting worse every day. Jake could see it in the way the aliens moved, slower and more carefully, like they were trying to save energy. The bright colors that usually pulsed through the Zephyrian skin had faded to dull grays and browns. The Vortakians, who normally worked with all 4 arms moving at once, now used only 2 arms for most tasks. Even the proud Nexari, who always stood perfectly straight, were beginning to slouch. Jake's daily food rations had been cut again, but he did not feel hungry like the aliens did. Every evening he would sneak behind his quarters and harvest fresh vegetables from his secret garden. The taste of a sun-warmed tomato or a crisp ear of corn was like a miracle after months of flavorless synthetic paste. His plants were producing more food than he could eat, and he had started storing the extra vegetables in containers under his bed. Lisa Shun, the camp's human medical officer, had arrived on a supply shuttle just before the crisis began. She was the only other human in the camp, and Jake was grateful to finally have someone to talk to who understood what Earth was like. Lisa was smart and professional, and the aliens respected her medical knowledge even if they did not think much of humans in general. "Jake, you look healthier than anyone else in this camp," Lisa said one day when she stopped by his quarters to check on him. "Everyone else is showing signs of malnutrition, but your color is good and you seem to have plenty of energy. Are you getting extra rations somehow?" Jake hesitated. He trusted Lisa, but he was not sure if he should tell her about his garden. If the information got back to Commander Veltar, it could mean trouble for both of them. "I have been very careful with my food," Jake said finally. "Maybe humans handle synthetic nutrition better than the other species." Lisa looked at him with the expression doctors get when they know a patient is not telling them everything. "Jake, I have been monitoring the health of everyone in this camp. The Zephyrians are losing their skin luminosity, which means their cellular energy is dropping. The Vortakians are having trouble with coordination, and several Nexari have fainted during work shifts. But you look like you just came back from a vacation on a tropical planet." Before Jake could answer, there was a knock on his door. Jake opened it to find Zixara and two other young aliens standing outside. One was a Vortakian with unusually bright yellow skin, and the other was a Nexari who looked very nervous. "May we come in?" Zixara asked quietly. "We need to speak with you privately." Jake looked at Lisa, who nodded, and then let the three aliens into his small room. They all looked around at the simple furniture and the single window, like they had never seen such a basic living space before. "We have been conducting unauthorized observations of your agricultural activities," the Vortakian said in a voice that sounded like he was confessing to a crime. "I am Yelwin, junior engineer. This is Nexara, junior analyst. We represent a group of younger staff members who believe the senior leadership is making a mistake by refusing to consider alternative food sources." "How many aliens know about my garden?" Jake asked. 17 of us have been watching and taking measurements," Nexara said nervously. "We have kept it secret from the senior staff, but we cannot hide our scientific curiosity. Your plants are producing nutritional values that we have never seen before." Lisa stepped forward with interest. "What kind of measurements are you talking about?" Zixara's skin shifted to a pale green color that seemed to indicate excitement. "Protein levels are 40% higher than our best synthetic alternatives. Vitamin content is beyond our measurement capabilities. And there are organic compounds in these plants that do not exist in any of our databases." "That is because they come from Earth soil," Jake said. "The microorganisms in my soil samples have combined with the minerals in your planet's dirt to create something new." Yelwin moved all four arms in a gesture that Jake had learned meant amazement. "We had theorized that biological agriculture might have advantages over synthetic food production, but we never imagined the differences would be so dramatic." "The senior staff will never listen to theories from junior personnel," Nexara said sadly. "Commander Veltar has already threatened to confine anyone who suggests that human methods might be useful." "What if we could prove that the food is safe?" Lisa asked. "I could run medical tests on volunteers to show that Earth-grown vegetables will not harm other species." Jake felt a surge of hope, but also fear. If Commander Veltar finds out what we are doing, he could send all of us away from the camp, then everyone would starve. "People are going to starve anyway if we do nothing," Zixara said. "Food stores are running lower than the official reports admit. Some of the senior staff have been taking larger rations while cutting rations for everyone else. The situation is becoming desperate." That evening, Jake made a decision that would Change everything? He invited the three young aliens and Lisa to join him for dinner behind his quarters. He harvested fresh tomatoes, corn, potatoes, and beans from his garden, and prepared a meal the way his grandmother had taught him back. On the farm in Iowa, the aliens were amazed by the colors and smells of the fresh food. They had never seen anything like it. When they tasted the vegetables, their reactions were almost funny. Zixara's skin flashed through colors so bright that Jake had to look away. Yelwyn made sounds with all four arms that seemed to indicate joy. Nexara actually started crying, which Jake had not known was something Nexari could do. "This is incredible," Lisa said as she bit into a fresh tomato. "I had forgotten how real food was supposed to taste." "The flavor complexity is beyond our understanding," Yelwyn said with his mouth still full of corn. "How do these plants create such sensory experiences?" "It is not just the plants," Jake explained. "It is the soil, the bacteria, the fungi, all working together the way nature intended. Synthetic food can give you the basic nutrients you need to survive, but it cannot give you the thousands of other compounds that make life worth living." The next day, the group began carefully expanding their secret research. Jake showed them how to prepare soil, plant seeds, and care for growing plants. The aliens were amazed by how much knowledge was required for something they had always thought was simple. Lisa began conducting medical tests on the volunteers, monitoring their health as they added fresh vegetables to their diets. The results were remarkable. Within just a few days, the aliens who were eating Jake's vegetables showed improved energy levels, better coordination, and brighter skin colors. But they also faced a new problem. More junior staff members wanted to join their group, and it was becoming harder to keep their activities secret. One morning, Jake was tending his expanded garden when he heard heavy footsteps behind him. He turned around to see Commander Veltar, standing with 4 security guards, his glass-like skin flickering with angry red light. "So, this is where you have been spreading your Earth contamination," the commander said in a voice like breaking ice. "I should have known that humans could not be trusted to follow simple instructions." Jake stood perfectly still as Commander Veltar walked slowly around his garden, looking at the huge plants with disgust and anger. The security guards, 2 Nexari and 2 Vortakians, positioned themselves to block any escape routes, though Jake had no intention of running away. "Destroy all of this immediately," Commander Veltar ordered the guards. "Burn the plants and sterilize the soil. I will not have this primitive contamination spreading through our camp." "Sir, please wait," Jake said, trying to keep his voice calm. "These plants could help solve the food crisis. They are producing more nutrition than your synthetic systems ever did." The commander's skin flashed with bright angry colors. "I have heard about your secret meetings with junior personnel. You have been conducting unauthorized biological experiments and encouraging insubordination among my staff. This ends now." One of the Nexari guards stepped forward with a device that looked like it would burn everything in the garden to ash. But before he could activate it, Dr. Lisa Chung came running around the corner of Jake's building. "Commander Veltar, I need to speak with you immediately," she said, breathing hard from running. "I have medical data that you need to see before you make any decisions about this garden." "Dr. Chun, you are out of bounds in this area," the commander said coldly. "Return to your duties immediately." "Sir, I am the Chief Medical Officer for human personnel, and I have been monitoring the health effects of the food shortage on all species in this camp," Lisa said with the confidence that came from her medical training. "I have data that could save lives." Commander Veltar looked like he wanted to ignore her, but his practical side seemed to win. "You have 2 minutes to explain yourself, Doctor." Lisa activated a small device that projected images into the air above her hand. "These are health scans from 17 junior staff members who have been supplementing their diet with vegetables grown in this garden. Look at their cellular energy levels compared to the rest of the camp population." The images showed charts and graphs that even Jake could understand. The aliens who had been eating his vegetables showed dramatically better health indicators than those who were surviving only on synthetic rations. "Furthermore," Lisa continued, "I have conducted detailed nutritional analysis of the vegetables themselves. They contain not only higher levels of standard nutrients, but also previously unknown organic compounds that appear to have beneficial effects on all 12 species represented in this camp. Commander Veltar studied the data with obvious skepticism. These results are impossible. Synthetic food systems are designed by the finest scientists in the galaxy to provide optimal nutrition for all known species. With respect, sir, your synthetic food systems are designed to provide basic survival nutrition, Lisa said. What Jake has created here provides something far beyond that. These vegetables are not just keeping people alive, they are making them healthier than they have ever been. Jake watched the commander's face as he processed this information. For the first time since Jake had arrived at the camp, Veltar looked uncertain instead of completely confident. Even if your data is accurate, the commander said slowly, I cannot authorize the consumption of food grown in contaminated Earth soil. The health risks are unknown, and the Federation has strict protocols about biological contamination between worlds. Sir, the health risks of starvation are very well known, said a new voice from behind the group. Everyone turned to see Dr. Thulvin, the camp's chief medical officer. Approaching with several other senior staff members, Dr. Thulvin was a Nexari, who had earned respect from all species for his practical approach to medical problems. Dr. Thulvin, this does not concern the medical department, Commander Veltar said, but his voice was less confident than usual. Commander, it concerns me greatly when I have aliens collapsing from malnutrition during work shifts, Dr. Thulvin replied calmly. I have reviewed Dr. Chun's data, and I believe we need to conduct official testing of these agricultural products immediately. The protocols clearly state that unknown biological materials cannot be introduced into Federation facilities without extensive laboratory analysis, Commander Veltar insisted. The protocols also state that emergency conditions allow for accelerated testing procedures when lives are at risk, Dr. Thulvin countered, and lives are definitely at risk. Our current food supplies will be exhausted in 3 weeks, not 6 as originally calculated. Several aliens have already required medical intervention for severe malnutrition. Jake could see that the political balance in the camp was shifting. The practical need for food was starting to overcome the cultural prejudice against human methods. But he also knew that Commander Veltar was too proud to admit he had been wrong. I propose a compromise, Jake said quietly. Let Dr. Thulvin conduct whatever tests he needs to prove the vegetables are safe. But while he is testing, let me teach some of your people how to expand the garden. If the tests fail, you can destroy everything and send me away. But if they succeed, you will have enough food to keep everyone alive until the supply ships arrive. Commander. Veltar was quiet for a long moment, his skin shifting through different colors as he thought. Jake could see the internal battle between his pride and his responsibility to keep the camp functioning. The testing will be conducted under strict medical supervision, the commander said finally. Any sign of contamination or adverse effects. And this entire experiment ends immediately. Understood, sir, Jake said, feeling a mixture of relief and nervousness over the next few days. Jake worked with Dr. Thulvin and a team of medical technicians to conduct the most thorough food safety testing he had ever seen. They analyzed every molecule in his vegetables, tested them on volunteer subjects from each species, and monitored the results with instruments Jake did not even know existed. Meanwhile, Jake began teaching agricultural techniques to a group of aliens who had volunteered to help expand the garden. The work was hard and dirty, and many of the aliens had never used their hands for manual labor before. But they were amazed by how quickly they could learn to work with soil and plants. Zixara turned out to have a natural talent for understanding plant biology. Her Zephyrian ability to sense energy patterns helped her know exactly when plants needed water or nutrients. Yelwyn used his 4 Vortakian arms to become incredibly efficient at planting and harvesting. Even Nexara, despite her nervous personality, discovered that she could create perfect rows of plants with her Nexari attention to detail. The most surprising volunteer was Captain Amy Rodriguez, a human pilot who arrived with an emergency supply dropped just as the testing was being completed. Amy brought news from other Federation facilities that made everyone realize how serious their situation had become. The solar flare damage was worse than anyone reported, Amy told the assembled camp leadership. 17 mining operations and research stations have lost their primary food systems. Some camps have already been evacuated, and others are rationing food so severely that people are getting sick. Commander Veltar looked older and more tired than Jake had ever seen. How long before normal supply routes can be restored? At least 6 months, maybe longer, Amy said. The Federation is having to rebuild food synthesis facilities across half the galaxy. Camps that can become self-sufficient will survive. The others will have to be abandoned. That evening, Dr. Thulvin presented his final test results to the entire camp leadership. Jake stood nervously beside his garden as the doctor projected his data for everyone to see. The vegetables produced by human agricultural methods are not only safe for consumption by all 12 species, Dr. Thulvin announced, they are nutritionally superior to synthetic alternatives in every measurable category. Furthermore, aliens who have been consuming these vegetables show improved health indicators across all biological systems. Commander Veltar was quiet for a very long time after the presentation ended. Finally, he looked directly at Jake with an expression that seemed almost apologetic. Mr. Morrison, he said formally, I hereby authorize you to expand agricultural operations as needed to sustain this camp indefinitely. You will have access to whatever resources and personnel you require. The transformation of the mining camp happened faster than Jake had ever imagined possible. Within 2 weeks of Commander Veltar's authorization, the barren ground around the facility had been turned into dozens of growing plots filled with earth vegetables thriving in the mineral-rich soil of Kepler-442b. Jake found himself in the strange position of being the most important person in a camp full of beings who had previously considered him barely worth noticing. Aliens who had ignored him for months now approached him with respectful questions about soil preparation, seed planting, and crop rotation. The same Nexari who had once refused to share meal tables with humans now worked beside him in the dirt, carefully tending rows of tomatoes and corn. The work was not easy, and Jake had to learn as much as he taught. Each alien species brought their own natural abilities to farming in ways that amazed him. The Zephyrians could sense the energy patterns in plants and know exactly when they needed water or nutrients. Their crystalline skin could actually channel sunlight to help plants photosynthesize more efficiently, making crops grow faster and stronger than anything Jake had seen on Earth. The Vortakians, with their 4 arms and superior coordination, became incredibly skilled at tasks that required precision and speed. They could plant an entire field in the time it would take Jake to plant a single row, and their multiple hands allowed them to harvest delicate vegetables without bruising them. Jake watched in fascination as Yelwyn used all 4 arms simultaneously to sort, clean, and package vegetables while carrying on conversations about soil chemistry. Even the proud Nexari, who had been the most resistant to manual labor, discovered that their attention to detail and organizational skills made them perfect for planning crop rotations and managing harvest schedules. Nexara created charts and schedules that maximized food production while maintaining soil health, something Jake had done by instinct but had never been able to explain in scientific terms. The success of the garden attracted attention from beyond the camp. Ships began arriving from other Federation facilities, carrying representatives who wanted to learn about the miracle food production that was keeping the Kepler-442b operation running while other camps were being evacuated or surviving on emergency rations. Jake found himself giving presentations to groups of alien scientists and administrators who hung on his every word as he explained concepts that his grandfather had taught him when he was 10 years old. The idea that soil was alive, filled with billions of microorganisms that worked together to support plant life, was revolutionary to beings who had spent centuries relying on sterile synthetic systems. The key is understanding that farming is not about controlling nature, Jake explained to a group of Zephyrian agricultural scientists who had traveled from their homeworld to study his methods. It is about working with nature, becoming part of the system instead of trying to replace it. Dr. Lisa Chen had become Jake's closest collaborator in documenting the health effects of the transition to natural foods. Her research showed improvements that went far beyond basic nutrition. Aliens who had been eating fresh vegetables for several weeks showed increased mental clarity, better emotional stability, and physical strength that exceeded their normal baseline levels. "We are seeing changes that we never expected," Lisa explained to a visiting Federation medical team. "The Zephyrian skin luminosity is brighter than we have ever recorded. The Vortakians are showing coordination improvements that suggest their nervous systems are functioning more efficiently. The Nexari report feeling more calm and focused than they can remember. The most dramatic change was in Commander Veltar himself. The proud Zephyrian leader, who had once been so rigid and dismissive, began spending time in the gardens every day. His skin, which had been dull and lifeless during the food crisis, now pulsed with bright, healthy colors that Jake had learned indicated contentment and well-being. One evening, as Jake was checking on the newest plantings, Commander Veltar approached him with an expression that Jake had never seen before. The alien leader looked almost humble as he stood among the growing plants. "Mr. Morrison," the commander said quietly, "I owe you an apology that I do not think I can adequately express." Jake looked up from the corn stalks he had been examining. "Sir, you do not need to apologize. You were following Federation protocols and looking out for the safety of your people." "No," Commander Valtar said, his skin shifting to colors that Jake now recognized as regret and respect. "I was allowing my prejudices to blind me to possibilities that could have saved lives sooner. I treated you as inferior because your methods seemed primitive, but I now understand that sometimes the most advanced solution is the one that works with natural systems rather than trying to replace them." The success at Kepler 442b became legendary throughout the Federation. Jake's agricultural protocols were requested by mining operations, research stations, and even some established colonies that wanted to reduce their dependence on synthetic food systems. The rigid social hierarchies that had separated different species began to break down as beings worked together in the fields, sharing knowledge and learning from each other. Jake established what became known as the Universal Growing Protocol, which combined human understanding of soil biology with alien technological capabilities and natural abilities. The protocol was adapted for dozens of different worlds and became standard procedure for any Federation facility that wanted to achieve food independence. Captain Amy Rodriguez, who had witnessed the transformation from the beginning, became Jake's partner in spreading agricultural knowledge throughout the galaxy. She transported seeds, soil samples, and educational materials to facilities across Federation space, and her reports of the success at Kepler 442b convinced even the most skeptical administrators to try natural farming methods. The change in the camp's social structure was as dramatic as the change in its food production. The rigid artificial boundaries between species that had seemed so important when Jake first arrived now seemed foolish and wasteful. Aliens who had never spoken to each other before were now working together, sharing meals, and forming friendships that crossed species lines. The evening meals became community events, where everyone gathered to share the day's harvest. Jake would sit with Zixara, Yelwyn, Nexara, and dozens of other aliens who had become his friends and students. They would talk about their homeworlds, their families, and their dreams while enjoying fresh vegetables that they had grown together with their own hands. Dr. Thulvin published research that revolutionized Federation understanding of nutrition and health. His studies showed that synthetic food, while adequate for survival, had been limiting the potential of every species that relied on it. Natural foods provided not just better nutrition, but also psychological and social benefits that artificial systems could never replicate. We have been so focused on efficiency and control that we forgot the most important aspects of food, Dr. Thulvin explained in his presentation to the Federation Medical Council. Food is not just fuel for biological systems, it is a connection to the natural world and to each other. The act of growing, preparing, and sharing meals together creates bonds that strengthen entire communities. Jake's small room at the edge of the camp was expanded into a proper research facility where he worked with scientists from across the galaxy to develop new agricultural techniques. But he never forgot the simple lessons his grandfather had taught him on the farm in Iowa. The most advanced technology in the universe could not replace the basic truth that life grows best when it is nurtured with patience, care, and respect. For natural systems, Pete Collins, a maintenance worker who had arrived during the crisis, became Jake's assistant and closest friend among the human personnel. Pete had a talent for understanding machinery and helped design tools that made farming easier and more efficient while still respecting the biological processes that made it work. "You know what amazes me most about all this?" Pete said one day as they watched a group of young aliens learning to plant beans. "It is not that we solved their food crisis. It is that we showed them they did not have to choose between being advanced and being connected to nature." The transformation was complete when the first official supply ship arrived 4 months later than originally scheduled. The ship's captain expected to find a desperate camp barely surviving on emergency rations. Instead, he found a thriving community with abundant food, healthy inhabitants, and a completely different social structure than any Federation facility he had ever seen. Commander Veltar, his skin now permanently bright with healthy colors, gave the supply ship captain a tour of the gardens that stretched to the horizon. "We no longer require food shipments," he explained with obvious pride. "We have become completely self-sufficient and our nutritional quality exceeds anything that synthetic systems can provide." The captain, a veteran of dozens of mining operations, shook his head in amazement. "In 30 years of Federation service, I have never seen anything like this. How did you accomplish such a transformation?" Commander Veltar looked across the fields where hundreds of aliens from 12 different species worked together tending crops that would feed them all.